Without further ado, let me introduce a colleague of mine, former past chairman of the World Affairs Council several times, and a member and trustee here at World Affairs Council, I dare say 30 years, and Armenian Piliposyan.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. I have the pleasure and the honor of doing the introduction, but I'd like to say just a few words to begin with. First of all, we are here tonight for this solemn occasion, which is, of course, the recognition and understanding of the Armenian Genocide, the 100th anniversary of the Armenian Genocide, because of our program chair, Parmas Katibi, who really came up with the idea that we should have a program recognizing this genocide, and of course the consequences of a genocide like this that went unaccounted for. And our chairman, Tommy Papa, who gave the okay, the approval that we could have a program. So we are both grateful to Parmas and to Tommy, and as well as Sylvie Terzakian, who helped put this together, that we have a program like this. So thank you, Tommy, and thank you, Parmas, for this program. It means much to us. Those of you who know me, both my Armenian friends and my non-Armenian friends, you know that I am the grandchild of survivors of the Armenian Genocide. So I heard of the accounts of the barbarity and the atrocities that were committed. Not in an academic setting, not from a textbook, but I heard it firsthand from my grandmother and those around her from our church, people who survived it. I heard of the perpetrated crimes and violations of men, women, children, infants by the Turkish soldiers and officials and some of their Kurdish allies. I recall my 95-year-old grandmother having nightmares of fire, remembering her village, her town being burnt by the Turkish soldiers. She had nightmares of men, women, and children in the death marches, mostly women and children in the death marches. She recalls as a 19-year-old girl with long blonde hair, mothers who couldn't carry their babies or their infants any longer in the death marches and leaving them to die in the desert as ordered by the Turkish soldiers. She remembered those to the day she died, those atrocities. Mothers abandoning their children. Has anyone seen the movie Sophie's Choice? You know what type of decision a mother has to make. She recalls young women and children being violated by the Turkish soldiers and the gendarmes without any restraint, without any moral bearing. And she shared those stories. But I suggest to each of you, read the account by Lord Bryce. He's not Armenian. He's the former British ambassador to the United States, who in 1919 wrote an account of the atrocities that were committed against the Armenians and others. And Tommy, I know you've been very good, and if you can just indulge me, I just want to read one account he gave before I do the introduction. Lord Bryce, the former British ambassador to the United States in the early 1900s, had first eyewitness accounts of what happened. And this is what he wrote on a 90-page document, one paragraph. We left for Harput. Harput has become the cemetery of the Armenians. From all directions, They have been brought to Harput to be buried. There they lie, and the dogs and the vultures lick their bodies. Now and then, some man throws some earth over the bodies. In Harput and Mesri, the people have had to endure terrible tortures. They've had their eyebrows plucked, their breasts cut off, their nails torn. Their torturers hewed off their feet or else hammer nails onto them, just as they do to shoeing horses. This is all done at nighttime, and in order that the people may not hear their screams and know of their agony. Soldiers are stationed around the prisons, beating drums and blowing whistles. It is needless to relate that many of these people died of tortures. When they die, the soldiers cry, "Now let your Christ help you." I can't even read what they did to the girls, to the little girls, and to the children, because I get too upset. But this is a genocide that has not been recognized by the Turkish government. And that is a crime in and of itself, and I'll let the others speak about that. But I want to recognize our distinguished panel that we have, and we're very fortunate and very blessed to have. I'd like to start with Hannah Geary. She's a clinical associate professor of law and founding director of the USC Gould School of Law International Human Rights Clinic. So she knows about human rights and how the violations permeate this entire world history. Her areas of teaching and research are in international human rights law, international criminal law, international humanitarian law, and international refugee law. She has worked on international human rights, international criminal law issues since 1994 in Africa, Asia, and Europe, with a number of other international and human rights organizations. I also like to recognize our second speaker, Carla Garapedian. She's the only American ever to anchor the famous BBC World News. Carla earned her PhD in international relations at the prestigious London School of Economics before cutting her teeth as a correspondent for NBC and later being swept up by the BBC as a director and anchor. Since leaving the BBC, she has cut a swath as an international documentary director, working for Hard Cash Productions, the company that produced the Emmy Award-winning film about the women in Afghanistan, entitled Beneath the Veil. She narrated the Armenian Genocide film Voices from the Lake by the acclaimed filmmaker J.M. Hagopian, as well as co-writing his award-winning film Germany and the Secret Genocide. The headlines about her in the LA Times calendar section is probably the best description of her work so far, documenting truth in dangerous places. We have Professor Levon Marsharlian. He's a professor of history and political science at Glendale Community College, where he teaches Armenian history and diaspora and Middle Eastern, Russian, and U.S. history and politics. He has taught at UCI, UCLA, and CSUN, Cal State Northridge. He has lectured in Armenia at the Academy of Sciences, YSU, the Yerevan State University, and AUA, the American University of Armenia. We taught a U.S. governmental course as a Fulbright Scholar in 1994. He has written numerous articles and letters, including the New York Times, the LA Times, Daily News, Education Week, and the Washington Jewish Week. Finally, we have Harut Sasunian, who is a publisher, a syndicated columnist, a TV commentator, a political analyst, author, award-winning documentary producer, lecturer, and human rights activist. He is currently the publisher and the editor of the California Courier newspaper. His weekly commentaries are translated into half a dozen languages, and I think he speaks every one of those languages, by the way. He is the founder and president of the United Armenian Fund, a coalition of 5 major Armenian American charitable organizations that has shipped over $700 million of humanitarian aid to Armenia since the earthquake. He also happens to be the senior vice president of the Kerkorian Lindsay Foundation, where he has managed $242,000 of infrastructure in Armenia. Currently, he serves on the board of the Diaspora Ministry of the Republic of Armenia. He's also an advisory board member of the Armenian National Committee of America. He has received awards for his humanitarian efforts, including being decorated by the President of the Republic of Armenia and recipient of the Ellis Island Award by the Medal of Honor, which of course he was recognized by this council about a year ago for receiving that. So please join me in welcoming our guest speakers. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the honor of being here this evening to moderate this distinguished panel. I want to thank the World Affairs Council, Tommy, Parmes, Becky, for extending the invitation, and it's really meaningful for me to be here with you tonight. As was mentioned, I'm a professor at the law school at University of Southern California, and in that role I have the honor of running an international human rights clinic, which in essence it allows students to work on cases while they're studying the law and learn the law by doing. A big part of my work has been on prosecution and punishment of international crimes, so genocide, war crimes, and crimes against humanity. Prior to teaching, I spent several years in The Hague prosecuting some of the first cases of genocide in Rwanda that have been prosecuted internationally in Rwanda and the former Yugoslavia. Subsequent to that, I am now serving as a legal advisor on the Khmer Rouge trials, but I've also done work on atrocities in the Congo at the International Criminal Court. And so the whole issue of there must not be impunity for acts that rise to the level of international crimes, particularly genocide, is one that's near and dear to my heart and something I'm very passionate about. And so it's really an honor to be here with you all tonight, to be part of this anniversary commemorating the Armenian Genocide on this 100th year. In the clinic with my students, we've had the opportunity to work on issues around the Armenian Genocide. We were part of an amicus brief that was submitted to the US Supreme Court in the Mosesian case, some of you might be familiar with, which involved appealing to the Supreme Court to uphold a California statute that uses the term Armenian Genocide and not to strike it down as unconstitutional. Unfortunately, the Supreme Court decided not to take the case up, but the fight continues. And so that is a little bit about my background and why I'm here, and very interested and looking forward to having a discussion with all of you following presentations by our panelists. And so without further ado, I want to turn the mics over to them. And we're going to start tonight with a presentation from Levon. He is going to be talking to us on the topic of the history of the Armenian Genocide. So just to give the context, and he's going to start with a short clip from the film that was mentioned earlier. And then following that, we'll hear from Carla, who will be talking on the topic of new media, the Armenian Genocide survivor testimonies. And Carla is going to be showing us excerpts from the new Armenian Genocide survivor testimonies collection, which is going to be launched this month at the USC Shoah Foundation's Visual History Archive. And this is especially meaningful for me. I actually am on the faculty advisory board for Shoah Foundation, which some of you may know was founded in the aftermath of Schindler's List and archives testimony of survivors from around the world of genocide, starting of course with the Holocaust, but other genocides. And then finally, we'll hear from Harut, who's going to talk to us on the topic of genocide recognition or the quest for justice. So with that, I will invite Levon to show us his clip and speak to us about the history.